Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Today is Thursday, March 23rd. Welcome to Senate Finance. The committee has 10 bills we will consider today, and we'll hear them in the following order, subject to change. We'll start with House Bill 1136, House Bill 686, 1150, 870, 907, 1006, 1146, 1156, House Bill 1159, and we'll end with House Bill 1272, unless the members come in a different order. To our guests, we're having sponsor-only hearings today. You all know that many of our colleagues are across the street in the House presenting their bills. Mean no disrespect to you or the subject matter. We'll give you all time to present your bill, and then we'll open it up to questions from the committee. So we'll start with House Bill 1136, State Government Office of Program Evaluation, Government Accountability, Review of State Workforce Development Programs. Good afternoon, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pleasure to be here. It's my first time ever in Senate Finance. So I'm Delegate Vanessa Atterbury, and I'm here to ask for your favorable report on House Bill 1136. This is simply a bill requiring the Office of the Program Evaluations and Government Accountability, in conjunction with legislative services, to conduct a review of all of the workforce programs that we have here in the state of Maryland, essentially to take a look at who's being served, is there any duplication, are the programs actually effective in doing what they said they're going to do. The bill was amended in the Economic Matters Committee to have the study done by June 1st, 2024. I had an earlier date, but in their wisdom, they changed that, which is fine. And I did speak with the Office of Program Evaluations and Government Accountability prior to having this bill drafted, and this is something that they could do. And with that, I would ask for your favorable report.
Thank you very much. I see no questions for the sponsor. Oh, Senator Lamb.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, just a quick question. Since the Office of Program Evaluation and Government Accountability falls under the Joint Audits Committee, I'm wondering if you checked in with the Joint Audits Committee about this?
The gentleman at the Office of Program and Evaluation said he was going to do that when we were working on the bill.
Well, as the Senate
personally.
Chair of the Joint Audits Committee, I've not heard.
Okay.
But I will check with Mr. Powell.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator. Any additional questions for the sponsor? Seeing none, that concludes the hearing on House Bill 1136.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Colleagues will now turn to House Bill 686, which is financial regulation, modernizing licensing of non-depository institutions and elimination of branch license requirements. Good afternoon, Delegate Queen.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, Madam Vice Chair and members of the Senate Finance Committee. I'm Delegate Pam Queen for the record, and I am here for asking a favor report for HB 686, which is a mouthful: financial regulations, modernizing licenses of non-depository institution, and elimination of branch licensure requirements. The Office of Financial Regulations is also here if you want to hear from them as well. But this is a bill that modernizes the way Maryland licenses its fee structure and practices to make us more in line with other states. And so it eliminates this concept of branch licenses and replaces with the updated fee structure for the entities involved. It doesn't change any of the regulatory requirements. All the other consumer protection compliances are still, regulations are still in place. It's a lengthy bill because we had to repeat all of the language for all of the different types of non-depository entities. So it's just repeating that for each type, but it's really simple in its code. So this actually passed out of the House Economic Matters Committee unanimously, as well as off the floor unanimously. And so we seek a favorable recommendation on this bill. And again, the Office of Consumer Financial Protections, Financial Regulations is here if you have any questions.
Thank you to the sponsor. I was just recalling we had a bill making some changes to the name of this department, and I was wondering if someday we're going to have to change that all in here. Okay. All right. Thank you. Are there any questions for the sponsor? Seeing none, that concludes the hearing on House Bill 686. Delegate Queen will turn to your House Bill 1150.
Okay, again, greetings, Chair Griffith and Vice Chair Klossmeyer and members of the Senate Finance Committee. Again, Delegate Pam Queen, seeking a favorable report for HB 1150, Commercial Law and Financial Institutions, Credit Regulation Shared Appreciation Agreements. So this bill is really clarifying what we have in practice to make it more clear for consumers in terms of how we handle shared appreciation agreements. And so making sure that this is licensed and regulated. So what happens when you are selling a home and there's an appreciation value, you can ask for that money before the sale is complete. And this is trying to make sure that all the appropriate disclosures are in place so that consumers are protected with this type of transaction. And so we're again looking to make sure that homeowners are getting the pay that they have had for advances, and the repayment is dependent on the value of the home at the time of the loan inception. And so we want to make sure this is clear in statute and following these regulations. Again, this is another bill that the Office of Consumer and Financial Regulation supports. And I think you've also have a letter from the Office of Attorney General that also talks to the need for this. And so again, we ask for your favorable recommendation on this bill. And this bill also passed out unanimously of the House Committee. So again, we look for your support on this bill.
Thank you very much. Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Delegate Queen, for this bill. So shared appreciation agreement, is that between like a homeowner and the financial institution where the home person would buy a home and as other owners in the title? Could you expand?
So
a
it's
little bit,
between
please?
the homeowner and I guess would be the financial institution or broker who they're selling the home with, using to sell the home. And so if that home has and the homeowner who's selling the house is getting funds ahead of time, like an advance on what they had planned to make off of that house. And so that's what we're making sure that contract is clear and everyone knows what they're getting into and then it's done appropriately.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
How are you, sir? Good to see my old buddy.
Are there any other questions or greetings? Senator Mounts.
I'm sorry, Chairman, colleagues. I just want to greet my former colleague and friend forever for the committee. Great to see you. Great
Good to
bill.
see you
Thank
too. All righty. We do great things together.
Okay, very good. Seeing no further questions or discussion on that concludes the hearing on House Bill 1150. We'll now turn to House Bill 870, Division of Rehabilitation Services, Developmental Disabilities Administration, Memorandum of Understanding. Delegate Guyton, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the very friendly members of the Finance Committee. I am Delegate Michelle Guyton, and I do not have the longest title today, so I'm thankful to Delegate Pam Queen for that. But I'm here to ask for your thoughtful consideration of House Bill 870 that requires a memorandum of understanding between the Division of Rehabilitation Services, or what's often referred to as DOORS, in the Maryland State Department of Education, and the Developmental Disabilities Administration, DDA, within the Department of Health. So this bill was requested by the work group to study DOORS that was established last year by the General Assembly and is supported. You have letters from both the Maryland State Department of Education and by the Maryland Department of Health. So the change will allow data sharing between these departments in order to simplify the process of transferring to adult services for our students with disabilities and expediting decision-making on eligibility for clients who are served by both departments. So this process currently can take a very, very long time. So when we talk about ending the wait, this is one way to address that. So there is currently an MOU between these two departments that focuses purely on policy and joint training, but not on data sharing. And one of the top recommendations of the DOORS Commission was to improve communication and relationships between state agencies And everyone feels that this is most likely to do that. So the vote for this bill was unanimous, both in the committee and on the floor. And I ask for your favorable report on House Bill 870.
Thank you. Senator Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I see there's a lot of testimony from government agencies, but I'm trying to look through, was there much support in the task force or in the testimony of this bill from consumer groups that represent either of these populations?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing them into this conversation, because I address this as first always a parent when I do this disabilities work. So yes, when you all voted last year along with the House to actually put this commission into place, it does involve stakeholders, not just from the departments, but also from other groups that do, and I don't have them off the top of my head. I can get those to you. But other organizations who work with this population of people and stakeholders, parents who have had great experiences with the system and those who have had poor experiences with the system, as well as self-advocates. So we wanted to have all those voices at the table, and they all agreed to this request as well.
And the purpose or the problem that you're trying to solve is for eligibility purposes. What is the purpose of the data sharing between the two agencies?
Right. So many of the same constituents are served by both agencies, and there are a lot of different ways that happens. Usually what we see is students in the special education system are served by DOORS early on for job training services. And then when they're eligible, when they're out of school, they go over to DDA for other supports. Often they actually serve the same clients at the same time, depending on what the situation is. It's a complicated system. Right now, a lot of kids fall into that chasm between the two departments because the eligibility determination from one to the other, they have to start from scratch, right? They have to go through the entire application procedure again. And when we talk about a long wait, we're not talking about weeks or months, we're talking about years and years. So, both departments feel like this would be very useful in helping them expedite that and serve more people accurately and efficiently.
Right, for the purpose of eligibility. Right.
Yes, generally for the purpose of decreasing the time
Okay.
that people have to wait in order to get these services.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you,
Yes.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. All right, seeing no additional questions, that concludes the hearing on House Bill
Thank you.
870. Have a good afternoon. We're going to turn to House Bill 907, Public Safety, Out of Service Elevators, Repair Contact. Delegate Watson, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair Griffith and Vice Chair Klossmeyer. I'm Delegate Courtney Watson for the record, and I'm happy to be here to present House Bill 907. This is about elevators. All of you must have apartment buildings or age-restricted condominium buildings in your district, and multi-story buildings have elevators. In many elevator contracts for residential building, elevator service contracts, there is a clause that says no other elevator service contractor can repair your elevator if you're under contract with us. And if you do break the contract and get someone else to repair it, then you must pay out the original contract. So in our district, we had a couple of instances during the pandemic when elevators broke, service parts or parts were hard to come by. The service repair contractor could not repair the elevator. However, there was another repair contractor that could, but they would have had to have broken a 5-year contract, and they would have had to buy out the value of that contract according to the contract in order to use the different contractor. So this bill is very simple. It just says, if you have an elevator that cannot be repaired by your current contractor, you may contract with another repair contractor without penalty. And it applies in this bill only to buildings that have tenants or occupants, residents that are over 60 and or with disabilities. And this was a bipartisan bill in the House and in the committee. The Howard County Department of Community Resources supports it, and the Maryland Association of Community Services, which of course encompasses 5 other organizations, the ARC and Disability Rights Maryland, et cetera, support the bill. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. I don't see questions from the committee. I do have a quick question, just
Sure.
because this is an area that before this session, I've learned more about elevators this session than I have in the previous 50 some years of my life. So I'm trying to understand, do you know why the original provision was put in place? Is it a liability issue, or why are these specific contractors requiring folks
Well,
to
it's-
use?
I can't speak for the contractors who put this clause in their contract, but I do know it's not in every contract. But I think it's to their advantage, obviously, as a business, to keep their customers from using other elevator service repair contracts. But I also think maybe it wasn't such a big deal before we had shortages of parts for elevators. So, but I can tell you, we had multiple instances in Howard County of this, and people were trapped. They were stuck on the 5th floor for weeks without being able to get down because they had mobility issues.
Thank you. No, I definitely see the need. I was just curious as to the history, because that seems like an odd clause to have. Toyota would love for me to only go to Toyota, but they can't make me go.
That's
So,
right. That's
yeah.
right.
Okay, Senator Mounts, did you have a question?
Yeah, yes, Chairman, thank you. So is this for residential?
It's only applying to residential buildings. Yes.
And and so for residential elevator maintenance, just, it seems like it's prohibiting an exclusive contract, an exclusive repair contract.
It doesn't prohibit an exclusive repair contract. It just says if that contractor is unable to repair the elevator, they can go to another contractor without penalty.
Was there any litigation involved in the cases in Howard County?
No litigation, but we had a senior building who did not break the contract because their HOA could not afford to pay the 5-year contract out.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any additional questions? Seeing none, that concludes the
Thank you.
hearing on 907. Thank you. We'll turn to House Bill 1006, Delegate Ruth, State Highway Administration Vegetation Management Pollinator Habitat Plan. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the Finance Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to present House Bill 1006. For the record, I'm Delegate Sheila Ruth. The pollinators, bees and butterflies, play a crucial role not only in our ecosystems, but in our food systems. A large number, most fruits and vegetables have to be pollinated in order to produce food that we can eat. And this pollinator population is in decline. The decline has caused a 3 to 5% reduction in food production worldwide, which is becoming a serious threat to human health. A recent study found that loss of pollinators is causing close to 500,000 early human deaths annually worldwide from nutritional deficiencies, and that 1% of all human deaths can be attributed to pollinator loss. It's urgent that we protect the pollinators. The General Assembly has already taken some steps, some good important steps, but we need to do more. One of the big issues that pollinators face is loss of habitat. So the State Highway Administration does already have a pollinator habitat plan where they are focusing on putting sites around rest areas and offices, but they manage 5,200 miles of highways. So there's a huge opportunity there to expand pollinator habitats and really make sure that we have plenty of habitats for our pollinators. In 2019, the University of Maryland Department of Entomology released a study that was results of 3 years that was contracted by the State Highway Administration. They found that selective herbicide use and a single mowing in the fall both increased the amount of flowers as well as the amount of pollinators over more frequent mowing. In addition to providing crucial pollinator habitat, the native plant meadows do more to filter runoff, so preventing flooding and improving water quality in the Chesapeake Bay compared to turf grass. So HB 1006 requires SHA to develop policies and procedures to encourage the use of native pollinator-friendly plants along state highways and to reduce mowing to the extent feasible without impacting motorist safety, and incorporating those policies and procedures into the existing pollinator habitat plan. But there's also a component of outreach and education to the public, because it's really important for the public to understand what is happening there. And we have all heard from our constituents concerns about areas that are not mowed. This does not in any way prevent SHA from mowing those areas. In fact, this could actually contribute to that in two ways. One way is with the education and outreach, SHA's policies and procedures could have a community input component to it. It would be up to them. This bill was developed in a way that's not prescriptive, and I worked closely with SHA in developing it. The other thing is, if they are managing the more remote areas as pollinator meadows, then that frees up more resources to mow, like in our communities where communities want to see a more manicured appearance. The loss of pollinators is impacting our food systems and our health, and further loss could have a devastating impact on humanity's ability to survive. So I ask for a favorable report for HB 1006. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Ellis.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Delegate Ruth, for this bill. As a beekeeper, I'm aware of the issues with bees and honeybees and other pollinators, and anything we can do to increase that far as the food for our pollinators and our bees is very much welcome. One thing I'm concerned about, and you touch on in your testimony, is the maintenance of highways. There's a lot of my constituents contact me all the time, and I'm about trash on the highways, on unmowed areas. And I'm fortunately, the Governor Moore administration instituted Operation Clean Sweep in the Washington suburbs and other areas of the state, Baltimore area, to pick up trash. And so that is a very good thing. Could you assuage my concern that if we have more grasses growing and they can say, hey, this is a pollination area, basically, we're not going to do anything. We're not going to cut. We're not going to pick up the trash. We're just going to leave it as is, which the trash is another big problem beyond our pollination issue for our bay and all this refuse going into our rivers and bays, and plastics deteriorating and causing really toxic outcomes. So what do you think this bill would kind of give them an excuse, not that they need it, to really say that an area is more, we want to keep that area natural, so we don't want to touch it, we don't want to do anything? Could you expand on that a little bit more, please?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question, Senator. And I did not know you're a beekeeper. That's very cool. The goal is not to have messy, grassy areas. The goal is to have, where it's appropriate, and in some places it's not appropriate, but where it's appropriate to have meadows of black-eyed Susans and other, native flowering plants that will actually help the pollinators. And so the bill is not prescriptive in how they do it. I absolutely agree with you that trash needs to be picked up, that the areas, particularly around our communities, need to be kept neat. That's really super important. But SHA manages 5,200 miles of roads. And so along the highways where it's not in our neighborhoods, there's a big opportunity there. Mowing is also a cost for SHA. There is an expense to it, a fairly significant expense, I understand from my conversations with SHA. So if they can manage some of these areas as pollinator meadows, then that frees up the cost and mowing to mow more frequently in our neighborhoods. And so, the goal would be the bill is not prescriptive in how they develop these policies, but the goal would be that they develop them in a rational way, which takes into account all of those considerations. And I've seen the information about Operation Clean Sweep. Thank you
for that. And so, I'm in a mainly rural area in Charleston, a lot of open areas. And I would hate for, say, hey, we'll take care of the suburbs or subdivisions, but these streets where people ride their bikes down, oh, that's a rural area. We're not going to cut. That's a pollination meadow. So are there any safeguards with that against basically ignoring the more rural areas?
So thank you for the question, Senator, and that's definitely a valid concern. There's no safeguards in the bill because I worked closely with SHA to try to make sure this is not too prescriptive, and it's actually based on a bill that passed in New York State and was signed by the governor. But the safeguard would be whatever policies they develop, they have to put in this plan, which is posted on their website. And so we have access to that. And if we have a problem with that, we can go back and say, this is not acceptable. You know, we need to be able to manage the communities better. So they have to be able to designate, you know, what they're going to do in terms of where these areas are going to be. And there's also an outreach component, which one possible thing that can be included in that is signage. So if they have an area that's a pollinator meadow, then they can put up a sign to say, this is a pollinator meadow.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
No, thank you for those questions and the answers, because the first thing I thought of as you presented the bill was, oh boy, we've been working so hard to get them to work with consistency on the state roads in each of our districts to take care of what is a pervasive, almost second to public safety, I think, during this last year where we spent time, a little more time talking to the voters at their homes. There was a recurring theme, and it was related to the maintenance of our state highways within the district. So I just want to echo the sentiments of my colleague from the southern part of the state. And your answers were very helpful. Let me just ask one other question. The Department of Transportation, I don't know if you saw the letter of information they put in the bill folder. And one of the things they suggested is that there may not be funding available from the federal government to apply for. So wanted to make sure you were open to a may versus shall as it pertains to applying for those federal funds.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm absolutely open to that. There were when I wrote the bill, there were some programs that were added in, I believe it was the Infrastructure Act, but I don't think that they've been funded. So thank you so much.
Correct. Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other questions for the sponsor? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 1006. We'll now turn to Senate Bill 1146, Delegate Kipke, Maryland Department of Health and Maryland Healthcare Commission Dental Services Survey and Regional Needs Assessment. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Nice to see you all. House Bill 1146 was an effort undertaken between my chairman and me as it relates to access through Medicaid to hospital-based dental care. In Maryland, we have a very big problem that's been going on for decades, where very sick kids and adults can't access treatments for necessary oral health care. And this is the kind of health care that is accessed through the ER. So painful surgeries, painful situations that require surgery and anesthesia, these folks have to wait a very long time, if ever, to get their health restored. There are several reasons for that. Access to OR time has been a big problem in the state, and also the reimbursement levels for these procedures have been a long-term problem. The bill before you is a product of work between the Maryland Hospital Association and Medicaid, and what it is a substantial study that will look at where the problems exist so that we can focus our efforts on establishing resources to fix the problem. So what we've learned is in some places in the state, there isn't as big of a problem, but in other areas, the problem is quite substantial. And as a result, we should probably invest more resources in those areas. And so this bill is an emergency bill. They've already begun the work on it. And before the next session, we'll be able to have a more intelligent look at how to improve access to oral health care through the emergency room.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for the sponsor? So as amended, the bill is the survey and
Yes.
the report, basically a needs assessment by region.
Right, well, there were two bills, one which would require access to OR time, and another bill that would have required changes in reimbursement. Those bills have been merged into this bill to take a more comprehensive look before we actually take affirmative action on establishing higher reimbursement rates or requiring OR time.
No, thank you. That was helpful because I was sitting here going, I think I heard something. So you just clarified that.
Thank you,
Okay.
Chairman.
Any additional questions? Thank you very much.
Thank
That
you.
concludes the hearing on 1146. We'll now turn to House Bill 1156, Pharmacist Therapy Management Contract. Delegate Lewis, good afternoon.
Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, esteemed colleagues of the Senate Finance Committee, good to see you again. I'm Delegate Robin Lewis here on behalf of House Bill 1156. This is, I know you hear this all the time, but it's a simple healthcare access bill. I aim to please. So here's what the bill does. It's simple technical fix, but here's what the bill does. It makes it easier for a patient, a provider, and a clinician, and a pharmacist to enter into a contract for care coordination and management. It's called a therapy management contract. It makes it easier by allowing these three people to enter into the contract orally, and second, to document their agreement in electronic form. The obstacles to entering into this contract became really obvious during COVID, when it was hard to get together, hard to get documents signed, mailing them was difficult. For the patient who might be sick with complex illnesses, the process of documenting a contract agreement could be really onerous and interfere with quick and responsive access to care. So we fix that problem by making the agreement oral and then documenting that agreement electronically. With that, I hope you'll give the bill a favorable report. It's so common sense. I can see you're all nodding your heads. But I thank you for your attention and ask a favorable report.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the sponsor? Seeing none, that concludes the hearing on House Bill 1156.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Colleagues, will turn to House Bill 1159, State Board of Dental Examiners, University of Maryland School of Dentistry faculty qualifying for examination. Delegate Cullison, Madam Vice Chair, congratulations and good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee, old friends, and people who are interested in dentistry. I appreciate the opportunity to present House Bill 1159 to you. The State Board of Dental Examiners, University of Maryland School of Dentistry faculty qualifying for examination. This is truly a really simple bill. And what it does is allow the privilege of an internationally trained dentist who has been working at the Maryland School of Dentistry for a minimum of 7 years and who is fully licensed and certified in their practice to take the Maryland or the American Board of Dental Examiners exams so that they can be licensed to practice outside of the School of Dentistry. We actually did this for dental specialists in 2017. But what we didn't do it for was for the general dentist. So what this bill does is extend that privilege to those who are experts in general dentistry. And why we need this is because, as you know, our Maryland School of Dentistry is one of the premier schools in the country. And they do this by recruiting the very best educators, and they recruit internationally. So we do have members of the staff who are highly skilled, highly trained, and qualified, educating our dentists here in Maryland. And but their practice is limited. The general dentist at this point is limited to the school itself. which means that they can't practice outside of the school. This bill would remedy that. They can't, so here's the things they can't do right now. They can't have a dental school bill insurance carriers for the service they provide. They can't become a member of the American Dental Association. They can't practice in a dental office unaffiliated with the school. We're not lowering any standards here. We're maintaining our standards. They would be required to have completed a general practice residency or advanced education, or is board certified by the American Board of General Dentistry, and submit a letter of support from the school. So with that, we know that this state values highly qualified and skilled dental practitioners. This law helps us to retain those foreign trained educators in our state. So I thank you very much for your consideration and respectfully request your favorable report. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Senator Lamb.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just looking at the bill. Obviously, it's a fairly short bill, but two questions. One, how is advanced education in general dentistry program defined? What is advanced education?
I'm sorry, I can't respond to that. I don't have an answer. However, there is someone here who might be able to, if that's permissible.
Do you have someone here?
Dan, can you do it?
We're calling in expert witnesses. This is.
Thank you, Madam Chair, member of the committee. I'm Dan Doherty. I represent the Maryland State Dental Association. That language is referring to the type of advanced training that the dental school requires. That language is from the dental school. So there are a number of programs where you can go as a general dentist and become certified in general dentistry or in aspects of general dentistry. And it includes that rather multiple number of courses or programs.
But it's not unique to the University of Maryland Dental School? Or can someone else set up a advanced education in general dentistry program and whoever completes that would also qualify?
If the person, general dentist, is trained in the United States, they graduate from a US or Canadian school, they're eligible to take the ADEX exam. When you're foreign trained, you're not. So the additional layer for these foreign trained dentists, in addition to teaching for at least 7 years, are to take these kinds of advanced programs before you're allowed to take the ADEX exam. So yes, general dentists from who went to Maryland or Penn or wherever could take these courses, but they wouldn't need it in order to be able to take the exam. They just have to graduate from the school in the United States.
So they could take these advanced education programs in a different institution and still qualify under them?
No, the bill is very clear. They have to be faculty members at the University of Maryland Dental School.
I see. Okay. And then last question then, when it comes to these provisions, there's qualifiers next to A and B of those lines. The or in line B makes it or for line 2, which is board certification. So I'm just trying to understand why it was drafted that way, because it says a general dentistry practice or residency or advanced education in a general dentistry program or board certified by the American Board of General Dentistry.
It's any one of those three. I don't know why there are 2 ors in there. The bill drafter did that, but I think it would be 1, 2, or 3. That's the way it should read.
So in that regard, it could be paragraph A, paragraph B, and paragraph C with ors in between all of them, because it looks like the last provision is under a separate paragraph that's pulled out from the other two provisions, but I can talk to the drafter or talk to council here on that.
Okay.
It just seems like it was drafted a little odd there. But it doesn't sound like there's any reason it was drafted that way. These are all meant to be or equivalent.
Yes,
Eligibility based on board.
all are equivalent in terms of showing qualifications to stand for the exam.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you
you,
for
Madam
those
Chair.
questions and those answers. Are there any other questions for the sponsor or the expert? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. That concludes the hearing on House Bill 1159.
Thank you for that allowance, Madam Chair.
Absolutely. All right, colleagues, we will now turn to House Bill 1272, Maryland Insurance Commissioner Enforcement Specialty Mental Health Services and Payment of Claims Sunset Extension. Delegate Bagnell, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Heather Bagnell, District 33C, Anne Arundel County, here on behalf of House Bill 1272. You have my written testimony, so I will summarize. I know you've heard this, but this is a simple bill, but it's actually a really essential tool for our behavioral health system, and it is an emergency bill. So in 2020, Maryland Department of Health started utilizing the services of Optum, an administrative service organization. Many, if not all, members of this committee have heard from providers about the ongoing challenges they've experienced due to a rather disastrous transition, resulting in delayed payments, wrongful claim denials, and multiple reconciliation issues. In 2021, in an effort to give some comfort to providers and stabilize our behavioral health system, an emergency bill was passed ensuring that the Maryland Insurance Commissioner will enforce a provision of code requiring administrative service organizations to pay claims on mental health services. This action was necessary after it was discovered that Optum was not paying out clean claims on mental health services, effectively preventing mental health organizations providing those services from operating. As this was a corrective measure, in the 2021 bill was set to expire in 2 years. That bill expires this year. However, the situation concerning unpaid claims remains unresolved, and information presented in some of our early briefings this session indicated that the need for corrective action remains. House Bill 1272 extends the sunset of the original act an extra 2 years, allowing the Maryland Insurance Commissioner to continue 2 years of work to ensure Maryland's mental health services are properly compensated for their work through the contract of the current administrative service organization, and that any fines or penalties cannot be passed on to the taxpayers. You will see in my written testimony extensive reports and complaints raised by providers, and they need the continued oversight and enforcement efforts of the Maryland Insurance Administration. Without this bill, mental health services are at continued risk as a result of unpaid claims. And with that, I respectfully ask for a favorable report on House Bill 1272.
Thank you very much. Senator Giles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have a question. I just want to thank Delegate Bagnell for bringing this bill. She knows as well as I do how often this issue has been raised by providers in our district and the frustrations that they've dealt with unpaid claims. So I just appreciate you bringing this bill. So thank you. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Lamb.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you as well for bringing this forward. Very familiar with a lot of the issues that stem from Optum because there have been multiple audit findings with regards to how the ASO contract has been handled. Excuse me. I guess my question is, has the Insurance Administration been fairly responsive in trying to enforce prompt payments?
They have been very responsive, and in fact, they also supported the request to extend the sunset because they are concerned without the oversight and enforcement authority that the problem will become greater.
Okay, and Optum has not expressed any opposition to this?
Optum has not expressed that they are neutral on this bill. They have not expressed an opinion.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. And like probably every member of this committee, if not every member of the General Assembly, we've all been engaged in this ASO conversation for the past 4 or 5 years. As a matter of fact, some of us that predate that go back to the previous ASO and the issues that led to that contract. So this looks like it is an extension of a part of a solution to a very complicated and multifaceted ongoing issue. So I don't have anything to add except for thank you. I don't see any additional questions from the committee, so we thank you for your testimony. And that concludes the hearing on House Bill 1272. Colleagues, that is the last bill on our hearing schedule this afternoon. We're going to take what I call a micro break and then come back and do some voting.